Clara Ruth Dawson dropped to her knees in the middle of the dirt road, her body finally giving out after 3 days of walking without food. Her fingers clawed at the ground as wagon wheels rolled past, spraying mud across her torn dress. Not one stopped. Not one looked back. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Please, God, don't let me die like this." She was 33 years old, a widow, homeless, and the last town had just thrown her out like yesterday's garbage. If you want to see how Clara survives this, subscribe to our channel and follow her journey to the very end. Comment your city below so we can see how far her story has traveled. Clara's hands hit the dirt first, then her knees, then her whole body crumpled forward until her forehead pressed against the cold spring mud. She could feel the rumble of wagons passing by, hear the voices of people who looked and kept walking. "Mama, what's wrong with that lady?" "Don't look at her, sweetheart. Keep walking." Clara wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She did neither. Her body had nothing left to give. 3 days ago, she'd buried her husband in a pine box she couldn't afford. 2 days ago, men in dark coats showed up with papers covered in numbers she didn't understand. Debts, they said. Gambling debts. Mining investments gone wrong. Her husband had borrowed from everyone: the bank, the general store, 3 different men in suits who looked at her cabin like vultures eyeing a carcass. By sundown, they'd taken everything. The rocking chair her grandmother had brought from Virginia, the quilt her mother stitched for her wedding day, the small gold locket with her parents' picture inside, the only thing she had left of them. All of it. Gone. They'd left her with what they called worthless kitchen scraps. An old blackened skillet, a cracked clay pot, and a wooden spoon worn smooth from years of stirring. Clara pushed herself up to sitting. Her arms shook so bad she almost fell again. Ma'am, you can't stay there." She looked up. A man in a sheriff's badge stood over her, his hand resting on his belt. "Please," Clara said. "I just need a moment to—" "You need to move along. We don't allow vagrants in this town." "I'm not a vagrant. My name is Clara Dawson. I'm a widow. I'm looking for work." The sheriff's eyes traveled down her muddy dress, her cracked boots, her tangled hair. His lip curled. "We got enough trouble without adding more. You best move on before I have to make you." Clara stared at him. This was the 4th town, the 4th sheriff, the 4th time someone looked at her like she was less than human. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That ain't my problem, ma'am." Clara grabbed her bundle, her skillet, her pot, her spoon wrapped in the only shawl she had left, and pulled herself to standing. Her vision went black at the edges. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. "There's a water pump at the edge of town." The sheriff said, his voice slightly softer now. "You can fill your canteen there, but you gotta be gone before dark." Clara nodded. What else could she do? She walked. The water pump sat near a small grove of cottonwood trees, their spring leaves just starting to unfurl. Clara pumped until her arms screamed, then drank until her stomach cramped. She splashed water on her face, tried to finger comb the worst tangles from her hair. A woman's voice made her spin around. "You the one Sheriff Briggs ran out?" Clara's hands flew to smooth her dress, a useless gesture. "I wasn't causing trouble. I just collapsed. I've been walking for—" "I didn't ask for your life story." The woman was maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled back tight and arms crossed over her chest. But her eyes weren't cruel, just tired. "You looking for work?" "Yes, ma'am. I can cook. I can clean. I can do laundry, mend clothes, tend gardens." "Can you cook well?" Clara paused. "Yes, ma'am. My mother taught me. She was the best cook in our county back in Missouri." The woman studied her for a long moment. "I'm Eleanor Price. I run the general store. I can't hire you. My husband would have a fit, but I know someone who might." Clara's heart jumped. "Who?" "Man named Ezra Blackwood. Owns the biggest ranch in the territory about 15 miles west. He's been through 6 cooks in 2 years. None of them lasted." "Why not?" Eleanor's face shifted. Something flickered in her eyes, pity maybe, or warning. Ezra's difficult. He lost his wife and baby 6 years back. Something broke in him that day. He's fair to his workers, pays well, never cheats anyone. But he's cold, Mrs. Dawson. Cold as a mountain winter. Most folks can't stand working in that kind of silence. Clara thought about the silence of her own empty cabin. The silence of walking roads where no one stopped to help. "I'm not afraid of silence," she said. Eleanor reached into her apron and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Here, cornbread and dried beef. It ain't much." Clara's eyes burned. "I can't pay you." "I didn't ask you to." Eleanor pressed this bundle into her hands. "Follow the main road until you hit the fork. Take the left path toward the ridge. The ranch spreads out below. You'll see it." "Why are you helping me?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Because I remember what it felt like, being alone, having nobody." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Don't expect kindness from Ezra Blackwood. Don't expect conversation or friendship or warmth. But if you can cook, really cook, you might just survive there. And if I can't, then you'll be walking again by week's end." What? Clara walked through the night. Her feet blistered inside her worn boots. Her legs ached with every step. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and Clara Ruth Dawson was not ready to die. When dawn broke, she saw the fork in the road, left toward the ridge, Eleanor had said. Clara went left. The climb was brutal. Her empty stomach twisted, her head pounded. But then she reached the top and she stopped. The ranch spread across the valley below like something from a dream. Fenced pastures dotted with cattle, sturdy barns and outbuildings. And in the center, a large log house with smoke curling from its chimney. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was her last chance. Clara straightened her dress, lifted her chin, and began the descent. 2 men stopped her at the gate. "Who are you?" The taller one stepped forward, hand on his hip where a pistol hung. "What do you want?" "My name is Clara Dawson. I heard the ranch needs a cook." The men exchanged glances. The shorter one, younger, maybe 19, let out a laugh. "Lady, you don't want to work here. The boss eats cooks for breakfast." "I'll take my chances." "Suit yourself." The tall one jerked his head toward the main house. "Tommy, go tell old Cy we got another one." Clara walked between them, feeling their eyes on her back. She heard whispers but didn't turn around. The main house loomed larger as she approached. The front door was heavy oak scarred from years of wind and weather. Clara raised her fist to knock. The door swung open before she could. A man filled the doorway. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the morning light. His hair was dark peppered gray at the temples. A short beard covered his jaw, neatly trimmed, but doing nothing to soften the hard lines of his face. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara cold. Dark, deep, empty, like looking into a well that had run dry years ago. "You the new cook." His voice was low, rough, like gravel scraping against stone. Clara forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm hoping to be, sir." "Ezra, not sir. I ain't your father." He looked her up and down, his expression revealing nothing. "You got experience?" "Yes, sir." She caught herself. "Yes. I've been cooking since I was old enough to hold a spoon." A lot of women say that. Most of them couldn't boil water without burning it. Clara felt a spark of anger cut through her exhaustion. "Then let me prove it." Something flickered in those dead eyes. Interest, maybe? Or just surprise that she'd talked back. "You got 1 week," Ezra said. 7 days. If the food's good, you stay. If it ain't, you're gone. I don't give second chances." "I won't need one." Ezra stared at her for a long moment, then he stepped aside. "Kitchen's through there. You start tomorrow. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6. 15 men plus me. Think you can handle it?" Clara walked past him close enough to catch the scent of wood smoke and leather. "I know I can." The room they gave her was tiny. A narrow bed, a small dresser, a window that looked out toward the barn. The table wobbled when she touched it, one leg shorter than the others. But it had a door she could close, a door that locked. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not from sadness, though God knew she had plenty to cry about. She cried from relief, from exhaustion, from the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, this broken woman might find a way to put herself back together. A knock at the door made her wipe her face fast. "Ma'am, you decent—" "Yes. Come in." An old man entered, white-haired and bent, leaning heavily on a walking stick. But his eyes, bright blue and sharp as needles, missed nothing. "Name's Silas McGregor. Folks call me Old Si." He settled into the chair by the window, studying her. "You're the new cook." "Clara Dawson." "I know who you are. Word travels fast on a ranch." He pulled out a pipe, began filling it with tobacco. "You met the boss?" "I did." "And what did you think?" Clara hesitated. "He's direct." Old Si laughed, a wheezing, rattling sound. "That's one word for it. Here's another broken." He lit his pipe, took a long draw. "Ezra Blackwood wasn't always like this. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Used to laugh so loud you could hear it in the next county." "What happened?" "Life happened, Mrs. Dawson." Old Si's face grew somber. "His wife died 6 years back. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it neither. Ezra was 3 days' ride away on a cattle drive when it happened. By the time he got back, they were already in the ground." Clara's hand went to her heart. "He blamed himself," Old Si continued. "Said if he'd been here, he could have gotten the doctor faster, could have done something." He shook his head. "Man's been punishing himself ever since. Works from sunup to sundown. Barely eats, barely talks, just exists." "That's terrible." "It is. But here's the thing, Mrs. Dawson. Somewhere inside that frozen shell, there's still a good man. The way he treats his workers, fair wages, decent hours, never a cruel word. The way he takes care of this land. The way he still puts flowers on his wife's grave every Sunday morning, even after 6 years." Old Si leaned forward, his blue eyes locked on hers. "I don't know what brought you to this ranch, and I ain't gonna ask. But I see something in you. Same thing I used to see in Ezra. Grief, loss. The kind of pain that makes you wonder if living's even worth the trouble." Clara's throat tightened. "You're very observant." "I'm old. It's all I got left." He pushed himself to standing, leaning on his stick. "Kitchen's stocked. You'll find everything you need. Breakfast is at 6 sharp. Don't be late." He was halfway to the door when Clara spoke. "Mr. McGregor." "Si, just Si." "Si, why are you telling me all this?" The old man turned, and for a moment his weathered face softened into something almost like hope. "Because every cook who came before you saw a paycheck. They saw a job. They didn't see the man underneath." He tapped his walking stick against the floor. "Maybe you will." Clara slept harder than she had in weeks. When she woke, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through her window. Her body ached everywhere, but her mind was clear. Today was the first day. She dressed quickly, twisted her hair into a neat bun, and made her way to the kitchen. It was bigger than she expected. A large cast-iron stove dominated one wall. Shelves lined with jars of flour sugar spices. A cold room in the back where meat hung from hooks. Baskets of eggs. Jugs of milk. Fresh butter wrapped in cloth. Clara's hands trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. This was what she knew. This was who she was. She started the fire first. Got it roaring hot while she assessed her supplies. Then she began. Flour, butter, salt, a little sugar biscuit dough came together under her hands like an old friend. She kneaded it just enough, not too much, the way her mother taught her. Cut perfect circles and laid them in the pan. While the biscuits rose, she started on the eggs. 15 men meant 30 eggs at least. She cracked them into a bowl, added fresh milk, a pinch of salt, a whisper of black pepper. Beat them until they were light and golden. The bacon came next. Thick-cut slabs that sizzled and popped in the skillet. She laid them in neat rows, watching the fat render the edges crisp to perfection. By the time the sun fully rose, the kitchen smelled like heaven. Men started trickling in around 5:45. They stopped at the doorway, noses lifting, eyes widening. "Good morning," Clara said firmly. "Please take a seat." Tommy, the young one from the gate, was first at the table. Did you make all this?" "I did." Clara set a plate of biscuits in front of him, golden brown on top, tender white inside. "Go ahead." Tommy took one bite and his eyes rolled back. Sweet mother of mercy. The other men descended on the table like wolves. Within minutes, the kitchen was filled with sounds. Clara had forgotten the clink of forks, the satisfied groans of men who hadn't eaten cooking like this in years. "These eggs," one man said, shaking his head. "These eggs are like nothing I've ever tasted." "The biscuits," another added. "Ma'am, these biscuits might be illegal. They're too good to be real." Clara smiled, her first real smile in weeks. But her eyes kept drifting to the empty chair at the head of the table. Ezra's chair. "He don't eat with us," Cy said quietly, appearing at her elbow. "Takes his meals in the study. I'll bring him a tray." Clara nodded. "I'll prepare it myself." She fixed a separate plate with extra care. The best biscuits, the crispest bacon, eggs cooked exactly right, strong black coffee in a blue tin cup. Cy carried it out. Clara waited. Ezra was at his desk when Cy entered. Papers spread everywhere. Ledgers open, a map of the property covered in marks and notes. "Breakfast," Cy said, setting down the tray. "Leave it." "You should eat it while it's hot. The new cook." "I said leave it." Cy sighed, but retreated. Ezra kept working. The numbers blurred in front of his eyes. They always did when he hadn't slept, which was most nights. But then something cut through his exhaustion. A smell. He looked up at the tray. The biscuits were golden, perfectly shaped steam, still rising from their surface. The eggs gleamed with butter. The bacon. God, the bacon smelled like every Sunday morning of his childhood. Against his will, Ezra reached for a biscuit. The first bite made him stop. It was perfect. Crisp outside, impossibly tender inside. It practically melted on his tongue. He tried the eggs, then the bacon, then more biscuits. Before he realized it, the plate was empty. Ezra sat back, something strange stirring in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. Hunger. Not for food he'd just eaten. Hunger for something else. He pushed the feeling down, buried it, went back to his papers. But the taste lingered on his tongue all morning. Days passed. Clara fell into a rhythm. She woke before dawn. She cooked. She fed 15 hungry men who looked at her like she performed miracles 3 times a day. She cleaned. She prepped for the next meal. She fell into bed exhausted and did it all again. The men warmed to her quickly. Tommy brought her wildflowers from the meadow, his ears turning red when he handed them over. A quiet hand named Marcus fixed the wobble in her table without being asked. Buck, the foreman, started saying please and thank you. Words the men swore they'd never heard him use before. But Ezra remained a ghost. She saw him sometimes in the distance, riding out at dawn, coming back at dusk, his tall figure moving between the barns. But he never came to the kitchen, never spoke to her. The trays she sent came back empty, every time. On the 5th day, Clara was preparing supper when she heard voices outside. Loud voices, laughing voices. She recognized Tommy's voice first. "You see how she bends over that stove, man, that new cook's got?" "Careful, Tommy." That was Buck. "You're playing with fire." "Aw, come on. We're just talking. Ain't no harm in appreciating a fine woman." Another voice she didn't recognize chimed in. Bet she's lonely too. Widow lady all alone. She probably... Clara's grip tightened on her spoon. Probably just needs a man to... Enough. The word cracked through the air like a gunshot. Clara moved to the window. Ezra stood in the yard, his face carved from stone. The men had scattered backward like startled cattle. The hell did you just say? Tommy's face went white. Boss, we were just... You were just what? Ezra stepped forward and Tommy stumbled back. You were just talking about a woman who works in my house, a woman under my protection. It was only jokes. I don't pay you to make jokes. Ezra's voice dropped lower, colder. Mrs. Dawson is the cook of this ranch. She will be treated with respect. Complete respect. Any man who forgets that can pick up his wages and get the hell off my property. Silence. Complete silence. Ezra looked at each man in turn. Are we clear? Yes, boss. The words came in a ragged chorus. Good. Now get back to work. The men scattered. Ezra stood alone for a moment, his shoulders rigid. Then slowly he turned toward the kitchen window. Clara stepped back, but not fast enough. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Something she couldn't name. Not gratitude, though she felt that too. Something deeper. Something that made her heart stutter in her chest. Then Ezra looked away and walked toward the barn. Clara stood at the window for a long time, her wooden spoon forgotten in her hand. That night when Clara prepared Ezra's tray, she added something new. A small apple tart made with dried fruit and precious sugar she'd rationed from her supplies. The crust was golden, perfectly flaky. The filling glistened. She sent it with Cy and waited. An hour later, Cy returned with the empty tray. He ate everything, the old man said. Even the tart. Asked where you learned to bake like that. Clara's heart lifted. What did you tell him? Told him to ask you himself. Cy winked. Man's got to learn to use his words again sometime. On the 7th day, Clara woke to rain. Not a gentle spring shower, a full driving storm that pounded the roof and turned the yard to mud. She could hear men shouting outside, the bawling of cattle, the chaos of a ranch fighting against the weather. She cooked anyway. By the time the men came stumbling in, soaked and shivering, the kitchen was warm and bright. Hot coffee steamed in cups. Fresh bread still warm from the oven. A massive pot of stew bubbled on the stove, thick with beef and potatoes and carrots. Lord have mercy, Buck said, dripping on the floor. Woman, you're a saint. Clara smiled and ladled stew into bowls. The men ate like they'd been starving for weeks. The rain hammered against the windows. And for a little while the kitchen felt like the safest place in the world. Then the door opened. Ezra Blackwood stood in the frame, rain streaming down his face, his clothes plastered to his body. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, mud on his boots, his jaw tight with tension. He looked at Clara. She looked at him. The room went silent. Mrs. Dawson. His voice was rough-tired. I believe today is your 7th day. Clara's heart clenched. This was it. The verdict. Yes, she said. It is. Ezra stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from his coat. Then slowly he walked to the table, picked up a bowl, held it out to her. I'd like some of that stew. Clara took the bowl. Their fingers brushed. You're staying, Ezra said quietly, so quietly that only she could hear. If you want to. Clara's eyes burned. I want to. Ezra nodded once. Then he turned and walked to his usual spot at the head of the table, the seat that had been empty for 6 long years. He sat down, and for the first time since Clara arrived at Blackwood Ranch, Ezra Blackwood ate his meal with his men. The men didn't know where to look. Ezra Blackwood sat at the head of the table, spooning stew into his mouth like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he hadn't spent 6 years taking every meal alone in his study. Like the empty chair hadn't become such a fixture that some of the newer hands didn't even know it was meant for him. Tommy was the first to break the silence. So, storm's pretty bad out there, huh? Buck kicked him under the table. What? Tommy rubbed his shin. I'm just making conversation. Then make it quieter, Buck muttered. Clara moved between the men, refilling bowls, pouring coffee, keeping her hands busy so no one would see them shaking. She could feel Ezra's presence like heat from a fire. Every time she passed behind his chair, the hair on her arms stood up. Mrs. Dawson? She stopped. Yes. Ezra didn't turn around. This stew, what's in it? Beef potatoes, carrots, onion, bay leaf, thyme, black pepper, a little red wine for depth. Wine. I found a bottle in the back of the pantry. It was turning anyway. Seemed ashamed to waste it. Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then, my wife used to cook with wine. The room went still. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know what to say. Nobody did. She said it was the secret. Ezra continued, his voice distant. Said plain water made plain food, but wine made it sing. Old Cy cleared his throat. Mary Ellen was a fine cook. She was. Ezra set down his spoon. But this is just as good. Maybe better. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Dawson. He was gone before Clara could respond. The men sat in stunned silence. Buck let out a long breath. Well, he said, that's the most words I've heard him string together in 3 years. Tommy shook his head. What just happened? Old Cy pushed back from the table, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What happened, boy, is that our Clara here just performed a miracle. Clara felt her cheeks flush. I just made stew. No, ma'am. Cy's blue eyes twinkled. You made him remember. The rain continued through the night, but by morning, the sky had cleared to a brilliant spring blue. Clara was up before dawn as always, kneading bread dough when she heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy footsteps, familiar footsteps. She didn't turn around when the kitchen door opened. You're up early, Ezra said. So are you. Ranch don't run itself. He moved to the stove, poured himself coffee from the pot she'd already made. Mind if I sit? Clara's hands stilled in the dough. In the week she'd been here, Ezra had never once set foot in her kitchen. Now he was asking to sit. It's your house, she said carefully. It's your kitchen. She looked at him then. Really looked. In the soft morning light he seemed different. The hard lines of his face had softened slightly. The emptiness in his eyes was still there, but something else flickered beneath it. Something almost like life. Sit wherever you like, Clara said. Ezra pulled out a chair at the small table near the window. Not the big table where the men ate, but the little one where Clara took her own meals. He sat with his coffee cupped in both hands, watching her work. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, just full, heavy with things unsaid. You don't have to tell me, Ezra finally said, but I'm wondering what brought you here. Clara's hands resumed their rhythm, pushing and folding the dough. Cy didn't tell you. Cy told me you walked 15 miles on an empty stomach to ask for work. He told me the sheriff in Miller's Creek ran you out of town. He told me Eleanor Price gave you directions. Ezra took a sip of coffee. He didn't tell me why. Clara was quiet for a long moment. The dough was smooth now, ready to rise. She covered it with a cloth and wiped her hands on her apron. My husband died 3 weeks ago, she said. Mining accident. Or so they told me. I never saw the body. I'm sorry. Don't be. We weren't. It wasn't a happy marriage. The words came out before she could stop them. She'd never admitted that to anyone. He was a hard man. Not cruel, just absent. Always chasing the next big strike. The next fortune, just over the horizon. Ezra said nothing, just listened. After he died, men showed up with papers. Debts I didn't know existed. Loans he'd taken out using our land as collateral. Gambling losses he'd hidden from me. Clara's voice hardened. They took everything. Everything my family had left me, and when I had nothing left to give, they threw me out. That ain't legal. Maybe not, but I'm a widow with no family and no money. Who's going to fight for me? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. I walked to 4 towns before I got here. 4 towns where people looked at me like I was dirt, like being poor was a disease they might catch. People can be cruel. People can be terrible. Clara met his eyes. But they can also be kind. An old man shared his supper with me and told me about your ranch. A woman I'd never met gave me food and directions. And you gave me a chance when you had no reason to. Ezra looked down at his coffee. I gave you a job, that's all. That's everything. Clara's voice cracked slightly. You don't know what it's like, having nothing, being nothing. When you gave me this job, you gave me back my dignity. You gave me a reason to keep going. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, birds were beginning to sing their morning songs. The light through the window turned golden. Ezra set down his cup and stood. He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes, close enough to smell wood smoke and leather and something else, something warm and alive. You were never nothing, Mrs. Dawson, he said quietly. The people who made you feel that way, they were the ones with nothing, nothing in their hearts, nothing in their souls. He reached out, and for one breathless moment, Clara thought he might touch her face. Instead, his hand fell to his side. You're worth more than you know. Then he turned and walked out into the morning light. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. What was happening to her? The days that followed brought subtle changes. Ezra began appearing in the kitchen each morning before the other men arrived. He'd pour his coffee, sit at the small table, and watch Clara work. Sometimes they talked about the ranch, about the weather, about the price of cattle, and the stubbornness of horses. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, needing no words. The men noticed, of course. They weren't blind. Something's different about the boss, Tommy said one evening, helping Clara carry dirty dishes to the wash basin. He actually smiled at me yesterday. Smiled. I near fell off my horse. Maybe he's just having good days, Clara said. Tommy snorted. Ma'am, Ezra Blackwood don't have good days. He has days where he wants to kill everyone and days where he just wants to kill most everyone. But lately, he's been almost pleasant. Is that so strange? Strange. Tommy set down the plates with a clatter. Ma'am, it's a miracle. And we all know why. Clara felt heat rising to her cheeks. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. Tommy grinned and headed for the door. Keep doing whatever you're doing, Mrs. Dawson. This ranch ain't never been better. Clara watched him go, then turned back to the dishes. Her reflection wavered in the wash water, a tired woman with flour in her hair and hope in her eyes. Hope. She'd almost forgotten what that felt like. 2 weeks after the storm, Ezra appeared at her door with a small wooden box. What's this? Clara asked. Open it. Inside, nestled in cloth, was a set of cooking knives. Not the dull, worn blades she'd been using, but real knives, sharp and gleaming with handles of polished wood. I noticed you were struggling with the old ones, Ezra said. These belong to... They were in storage. No sense letting them go to waste. Clara ran her finger along the flat of one blade. These are beautiful. They were my mother's. She passed them to Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen would have... He stopped, jaw tightening. She would have wanted someone to use them, someone who knows how. Clara looked up at him. Ezra, I can't accept these. You can and you will. His voice brooked no argument. They're tools, Mrs. Dawson. Tools need to be used. You'll do them honor." He left before she could protest further. That night, Clara held one of the knives up to the lamplight. The blade caught the glow, throwing tiny rainbows across the ceiling. She thought about the women who had held these knives before her. Ezra's mother, whoever she had been. Mary Ellen, the wife who died too young. She thought about Ezra keeping these knives locked away for 6 years, unable to look at them, but unable to let them go. And now he had given them to her. Clara pressed the blade against her palm, not hard enough to cut, just hard enough to feel its edge. A reminder that she was real, that this was real, that maybe, just maybe, something was beginning. Spring deepened, and the ranch came alive. Calves were born. Fields were plowed. Fences were mended. Clara watched from the kitchen window as men worked from dawn to dusk, their shouts and laughter carrying on the warm breeze. She found herself watching for one figure in particular. Ezra rode out each morning to check the far pastures, returning dusty and tired in the late afternoon. Clara always had cold water waiting for him, always had something extra on his supper tray, a slice of pie, a fresh roll, some small treat she'd made just for him. He never mentioned these extras, but his plate always came back clean. "You're spoiling him," Old Cy observed one afternoon, watching Clara arrange wildflowers in a jar for Ezra's tray. "I'm doing my job. Your job is to feed 15 ranch hands. It ain't to pick flowers for the boss." Clara felt her face grow warm. "Tommy brought these. I'm just finding a use for them." Cy chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. "Child, I've been on this earth 72 years. I know what it looks like when a woman's falling for a man. And I know what it looks like when a man's too stubborn to admit he's falling too. Cy, I ain't judging." The old man held up his hands. "Lord knows Ezra deserves some happiness after everything he's been through. And you?" He studied her face. "You deserve it too. I just want you to be careful." "Careful of what?" "Careful of his ghosts." Cy's voice grew serious. "Mary Ellen ain't really gone, Clara. She's in every corner of this house, every room he won't enter, every memory he can't escape. If you're going to love that man, you got to make peace with sharing him." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not trying to replace anyone." "I know you're not, but Ezra don't know that. Not yet. His heart's been frozen so long, it might not remember how to thaw." Cy reached out and patted her hand. "Give him time. Give him patience. And if the good Lord's willing, give him grace." That evening, Clara found herself outside the kitchen, walking through the twilight, toward a small hill behind the main house. She'd seen Ezra go this way sometimes in the quiet hours when he thought no one was watching. At the top of the hill, she found what she was looking for. 2 graves. Simple wooden crosses. The names carved deep into the wood. Mary Ellen Blackwood, beloved wife, 1847, 1872. And beside it, smaller baby Blackwood, gone too soon, 1872. Clara knelt in the grass between them. She didn't pray. She wasn't sure she believed in that anymore. But she spoke anyway, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not trying to take your place. I want you to know that. Whatever's happening between me and your husband, I'm not trying to erase you." The wind stirred the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "He's a good man. I can see that. I can see how much he loved you. How much he still loves you." Clara's throat tightened. "I lost someone too. Not like this, not someone I loved. But I know what it feels like to be alone. To have nothing. To wonder if things will ever be okay again." She reached out and touched the smaller cross. The wood was weathered, softened by years of rain and sun. "I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if Ezra will ever let himself feel anything again. But I want you to know, if he does, I'll take care of him. I'll take care of this ranch that you loved. I'll honor your memory. I swear it." She stayed there until the stars came out, then made her way back to the house. She didn't know that Ezra had followed her. Didn't know he'd stood in the shadows at the bottom of the hill, close enough to hear every word. Didn't know that for the first time in 6 years, tears were streaming down his face. The next morning, everything changed. Clara was making breakfast when Ezra came into the kitchen, but instead of sitting at his usual spot by the window, he walked straight to her. "Come with me," he said. "The biscuits can wait." He took her hand. Actually took her hand, his rough fingers wrapping around hers, and led her out of the kitchen, through the main room, down a hallway she'd never entered. They stopped in front of a closed door. "This was Mary Ellen's sewing room," Ezra said quietly. "I haven't opened it since she died." Clara's breath caught. "Ezra, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, fear, hope. "I want to." He turned the handle and pushed open the door. Dust motes swirled in the morning light. The room was small with a single window facing east. A sewing table sat against one wall, fabric still draped over the chair, as if Mary Ellen had just stepped away for a moment. A basket of thread in the corner. A half-finished quilt folded on a shelf. And everywhere, the presence of a woman who had been loved beyond measure. She was working on that quilt when she found out she was pregnant. Ezra said, his voice rough. Said she was going to finish it for the baby's cradle. She never got the chance. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. "It's beautiful." She was beautiful. Ezra moved to the sewing table, ran his fingers over the dusty surface. "I've been so angry, Clara. Angry at God for taking her. Angry at myself for not being here. Angry at the whole damn world for keeping on turning when my life had stopped." "That's understandable. Maybe. But it ain't right." He turned to face her. "Last night I followed you to the graves. I heard what you said to her." Clara's heart stopped. "Ezra, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't intrude. You—" He struggled for words, this man who had spent 6 years in silence. "You honored her. You spoke to her like she was real. Like she mattered." "She does matter. She always will." Ezra crossed the room in 2 strides. He stopped inches from her, so close she could feel the heat of his body. "I've been dead for 6 years, he said. Walking and talking and working, but dead inside. Nothing reached me. Nothing touched me. I didn't want it to." His hand came up trembling slightly and cupped her face. "Then you came. And something started waking up." Clara's tears spilled over. "Ezra, I'm not saying I'm fixed. I'm not saying I'm whole. But I'm saying—" He took a shaky breath. "I'm saying I want to try. If you'll let me. If you'll be patient with a broken old rancher who's forgotten how to feel." Clara laughed through her tears. "You're not old. I feel old. Then let me make you feel young again." She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his cheek. Just his cheek. Just that soft, simple touch. Ezra closed his eyes, like she'd given him the world. "The biscuits are burning," Clara whispered. Ezra laughed an actual laugh, rusty from disuse, but real, and took her hand again. "Then let's go save them." They walked back to the kitchen together, hands intertwined, the ghost of Mary Ellen blessing them from the room they'd left behind. But happiness, as Clara would soon learn, has a way of attracting darkness, and the darkness was already on its way. 3 days later, a stranger rode into Blackwood Ranch. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw him, a tall man on a black horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Something about him made her skin prickle. Something wrong. The man dismounted at the main gate and exchanged words with Buck. She couldn't hear what they said, but she saw Buck's face go pale. Then the man looked directly at her. Even from 50 yards away, Clara felt the impact of that gaze. Cold, calculating, hungry. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran inside. Clara. Ezra looked up from his ledger. What's wrong? There's a man at the gate, a stranger. He looked at me like... She couldn't finish the sentence. Ezra was on his feet in an instant. Stay here. Ezra, stay here. His voice left no room for argument. He grabbed his hat and strode out the door. Clara moved to the window, watching as Ezra approached the stranger. Their conversation was too far away to hear, but she could read the tension in Ezra's shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his hip. The stranger talked for a long time. Ezra's posture grew stiffer with every word. Finally, the stranger tipped his hat, mounted his horse, and rode away. Ezra stood motionless for a full minute. Then he turned and walked back to the house. When he came through the door, his face was ashen. What is it? Clara asked. Who was that man? His name is Marcus Crane. Ezra's voice was flat, hollow. He's a debt collector from Denver. He says... Ezra stopped, swallowed hard. He says he's looking for the widow of Thomas Dawson. Clara's blood turned to ice. He says you owe $3,000, Ezra continued. He says your husband borrowed money from some very dangerous people before he died, and if you don't pay it back, they'll take it out of your hide. Clara's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Ezra hadn't caught her. I don't have $3,000, she whispered. I don't have $300. I don't have anything. Ezra's arms tightened around her. You have me. Ezra, you can't... I can, and I will. His voice hardened into steel. That man isn't touching you. Not while I'm breathing. Not ever. Do you understand? Clara looked up at him. This man who had given her a home when she had nothing. This man who was slowly learning to love again. What are we going to do? She asked. Ezra's jaw tightened. Whatever we have to. The night after Marcus Crane's visit, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with numbers she couldn't pay and debts she didn't owe. $3,000. It might as well have been $3 million. She'd never seen that much money in her life, let alone held it in her hands. Thomas. Even dead, her husband was still ruining her life. A soft knock made her sit up. Clara. Ezra's voice low and careful. You awake? She crossed to the door and opened it. Ezra stood in the hallway, still dressed, a lamp in his hand. I saw your light, he said. Figured you couldn't sleep neither. I keep thinking about that man, the way he looked at me. He won't look at you again. Ezra's voice was hard. I promise you that. Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. You can't promise something like that. You don't know these people. If Thomas owed them money. Thomas is dead. His debts died with him. That's not how they see it. Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he held out his hand. Come with me. Clara hesitated, then took it. He led her through the dark house, past the kitchen, past the sewing room door, to a small study at the back. A safe sat in the corner, black iron with a brass dial. What are you doing? Clara asked. Ezra knelt before the safe and spun the combination. The door swung open. Inside, Clara saw stacks of bills neatly bound. More money than she'd ever imagined. I've been ranching this land for 20 years, Ezra said. Started with nothing but 40 acres and a stubborn streak. Built it up acre by acre, head by head. Everything I've earned is in this safe. He looked up at her. There's more than enough to pay your debt. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. No, Ezra, no. I won't take your money. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. That's your life savings, your security, your... What good is security if I'm alone? Ezra rose to his feet, closing the safe behind him. For 6 years, I've had more money than I could spend and no one to spend it on. No reason to care if it all burned tomorrow. Then you came and suddenly... He stopped, struggling for words. Suddenly, I had something to protect again. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I know you walked 15 miles on an empty stomach because you refused to give up. I know you cook like an angel and work harder than any 2 men I've got. I know you went to my wife's grave and promised to take care of me. You didn't know I was listening, but I heard every word. Ezra, I know you're scared. I know you think you don't deserve help, but you're wrong, Clara. You're worth fighting for. You're worth every penny in that safe, and 100 times more. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This man, this broken, beautiful man, was offering her everything, and she didn't know how to accept it. I can't let you do this, she whispered. You can't stop me. She laughed despite herself, a wet, shaky sound. You're impossible. So I've been told. Ezra's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. Let me help you, Clara. Let me be the man I should have been all along. Clara closed her eyes. For one long moment, she let herself lean into his touch. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. We'll do this together, she finally said. Whatever comes, we face it together. Ezra's lips pressed against her forehead. Together. But together, as they would soon learn, might not be enough. Marcus Crane returned 3 days later. This time, he wasn't alone. Clara was kneading bread when she heard the horses. Not one set of hooves, but many. She wiped her hands and moved to the window. 6 men rode through the gate. Marcus Crane led them, his black horse prancing beneath him. The men behind him were rough-looking, hard-eyed, with guns on their hips and cruelty in their faces. Ezra? Clara ran through the house. Ezra, they're here. He met her in the main room, already strapping on his gun belt. Stay inside. Don't come out no matter what you hear. I'm not hiding while you... Clara. He gripped her shoulders, his eyes boring into hers. These men aren't here to talk. They're here to intimidate. If they see you, they'll use you against me. Please, stay inside. She wanted to argue. Every fiber of her being screamed to stand beside him, to face this threat together like they'd promised. But she saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. Be careful, she whispered. Always am. He kissed her forehead and walked out the door. Clara pressed herself against the wall beside the window, watching. Ezra strode across the yard, his posture calm, but his hand resting on his pistol. Buck and old Cy appeared from the barn, flanking him. Tommy and the other hands emerged from various buildings, forming a loose semicircle behind their boss. Marcus Crane dismounted slowly, deliberately. His smile was the smile of a snake. Mr. Blackwood, good to see you again. Wish I could say the same. Ezra stopped 10 feet away. You bring friends this time. Business associates. Crane gestured to the men behind him. They wanted to see the ranch where Mrs. Dawson is hiding. She ain't hiding, she's working. There's a difference. Semantics. Crane pulled a folded paper from his coat. I have here a legal document stating that Thomas Dawson owed $3,200 to the Morrison Mining Consortium at the time of his death. By territorial law, that debt passes to his surviving spouse. I've seen plenty of legal documents, Ezra said. Most of them ain't worth the paper they're printed on. Crane's smile flickered. This one is, signed by a judge in Denver, witnessed and notarized. Everything proper and legal. Then take it to a court. Let them decide. Courts are slow, Mr. Blackwood. My employers are not patient men. That sounds like a threat. It's a fact. Crane tucked the paper away. We're prepared to offer an alternative arrangement. Mrs. Dawson works off her debt. 5 years of service. Room and board provided. At the end of her term, the debt is forgiven. Clara's stomach turned. She knew exactly what service meant. She'd heard stories of women trapped in such arrangements worked to death in mining camps, saloons, or worse. Ezra's voice dropped to a growl. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. The air went deadly still. Hands hovered over guns. Nobody breathed. Then Old Si stepped forward, his walking stick tapping against the ground. "You boys might want to look around," he said, his voice conversational. "Count the rifles pointing at you from those windows. Count the men standing behind Mr. Blackwood. Then ask yourselves if $3,000 is worth dying for." Crane's eyes darted to the bunkhouse, the barn, the main house. Clara followed his gaze and saw what he saw: gun barrels glinting in windows, ranch hands with weapons drawn, a small army of men ready to defend their home. "You'd start a war over a cook?" Crane asked. "She ain't just a cook," Tommy called out. "She's family." A murmur of agreement rippled through the men. Family. The word hit Clara like a punch to the chest. Crane's face hardened. "This isn't over." "It is if you're smart." Ezra took a step forward. "Ride out of here. Don't come back. Tell your employers that Mrs. Dawson is under my protection. Any man who tries to take her will answer to me." "And to us," Buck added. "All of us," Si agreed. The standoff held for one long, terrible moment. Clara could see Crane calculating odds, weighing risks, measuring the distance between victory and death. Finally, he mounted his horse. "You've made an enemy today, Blackwood." "I've made plenty of enemies. Most of them are dead." Crane's jaw tightened. He wheeled his horse around and spurred it toward the gate. His men followed, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Nobody moved until the sound of hooves faded into the distance. Then Clara burst through the door and ran. She hit Ezra so hard she nearly knocked him over. Her arms wrapped around him, her face pressed against his chest, her whole body shaking with relief and fear, and something she couldn't name. "You fool," she sobbed. "You absolute fool. He could have killed you." "But he didn't. He might come back." "Then we'll be ready." Ezra's arms came around her, holding her tight. "I meant what I said, Clara. You're family now. Every man on this ranch would fight for you." She pulled back to look at his face. "Why, I've only been here a few weeks. Why would they risk their lives for me?" "Because you gave us something we didn't know we were missing." Old Si limped toward them, his eyes suspiciously bright. "A reason to be more than just hired hands. A reason to care about this place again." Tommy nodded vigorously. "You make us biscuits every morning, ma'am. Ain't nobody ever done that before. You remember Marcus likes his eggs runny, and Pete can't stand onions, and I like extra bacon. You remember us." "That's just cooking," Clara said. "No, ma'am." Buck's voice was gruff. "That's love." Clara looked around at these men, rough-weathered, hard-working men who had stood ready to die for her. Men who had become, without her realizing it, her family. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." "Don't thank us yet," Ezra said quietly. "Crane was right about one thing. This isn't over." That night, Ezra called a meeting in the main room. All 15 hands crammed into the space, sitting on chairs, leaning against walls, crowding around the fireplace. Clara stood beside Ezra, refusing to be sent away. "Here's what we know," Ezra began. "Marcus Crane works for the Morrison Mining Consortium. They're not just debt collectors, they're land grabbers. They buy up debts of dead men and use them to seize property, force widows into servitude, take everything that ain't nailed down." "Then this was never about Clara's debt," Si said. "It's about your ranch." "That's my thinking." Ezra nodded. $3,000 is nothing to men like Morrison. But this valley, the water rights, the grazing land, that's worth a fortune. "They figured they'd use Clara to get to you," Buck said. "And they figured right." Ezra's hand found Clara's. "But they didn't count on her being under our protection." Tommy raised his hand like a schoolboy. "So what do we do, boss?" "First, we secure the property. Double watches day and night. Nobody rides alone. We keep the gates closed and the rifles loaded." "And second?" Clara asked. Ezra hesitated. "Second, I ride to Denver." The room erupted. "You can't leave," Tommy shouted. "It's too dangerous," Buck argued. If you go, they'll ambush you on the road, Cy warned. Ezra raised his hand for silence. I know a lawyer in Denver, served with his brother in the war. If these documents are forgeries, and I'd bet my ranch they are, he can prove it. We can get the law on our side. And if they're real? Clara asked quietly. Ezra looked at her. Then I'll pay the debt myself. $3,000, whatever it takes. You'd beggar yourself for me. I'd give everything I own for you. The room went silent. Nobody moved. Clara felt the weight of every gaze, the recognition of what Ezra had just admitted. You love her, Cy said softly. It wasn't a question. Ezra didn't flinch, didn't look away. I do. Clara's heart stopped, then started again, beating harder than ever before. I thought I was done with love. Ezra continued, his voice rough. Thought I'd buried that part of myself with Mary Ellen. But Clara, she didn't dig it up. She planted something new, something that grew so slow, I didn't notice until it had roots too deep to pull out. He turned to face her, fully taking both her hands in his. I ain't good with words. I ain't good with feelings. I've been living like a dead man for 6 years, just going through the motions. But you woke me up, Clara Ruth Dawson. You made me want to live again. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away. Clara couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face. You don't have to say it back, Ezra said. You don't owe me nothing. But I needed you to know. Before I ride into whatever's coming, I needed you to know the truth. Clara found her voice. It was small, shaky, but certain. I love you too. Ezra's eyes widened. You do. You impossible, stubborn, wonderful man. Of course I do. She laughed through her tears. You think I would have stayed for your charming personality. You barely spoke to me for the first week. Scattered laughter broke the tension. Tommy whooped. Buck slapped his knee. Even Cy cracked a smile. Ezra pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her. Not a gentle kiss. Not a careful kiss. A kiss that spoke of 6 years of loneliness and weeks of growing hope and a future neither of them had dared to imagine. When they finally broke apart, the room erupted in cheers. About damn time, Buck muttered. I'm going to cry, Tommy announced. I ain't ashamed to admit it. You cry at everything, Cy said. That's because I have feelings, old man. Clara buried her face in Ezra's chest, laughing and crying at the same time. For a moment, just one perfect moment, everything was right with the world. Then Ezra sobered. I still need to go to Denver. Then I'm coming with you. Clara. Don't argue. She lifted her chin. We said together. We meant it. If you ride into danger, I ride with you. Ezra opened his mouth to protest. Then he saw the steel in her eyes, the same steel that had carried her 15 miles on an empty stomach, the same steel that had kept her standing when the world tried to break her. Together, he agreed. We leave at dawn, Clara said. And we'll be ready when you get back, Buck promised. Ain't nobody taking this ranch while the boss is away. The men dispersed to their posts. Clara and Ezra stood alone in the firelight. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. Me too. Ezra pulled her close. Whatever happens in Denver, whatever we find, I want you to know that these weeks with you have been the happiest I've known since Mary Ellen died. Maybe happier. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. I'm not. I'm saying thank you. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving a broken old rancher a reason to hope again. Clara tilted her face up to his. You're not old. I feel young when I'm with you. Then stay with me forever. I intend to. They held each other until the fire burned low. Outside, men took up their positions. Rifles were loaded. Gates were secured. The ranch that had become a home prepared itself for war. And somewhere on the road to Denver, Marcus Crane was making plans of his own. The morning Clara and Ezra left for Denver, the whole ranch turned out to see them off. Tommy had packed extra food in their saddlebags. Buck had checked their horses twice. Cy had pressed a small Bible into Clara's hands, his mother's Bible worn soft from decades of use. "For protection," the old man said. "And for faith. You're gonna need both." Clara hugged him tight. "Take care of them while we're gone." "Take care of each other," Cy replied. Ezra swung into his saddle and reached down to help Clara onto hers. She'd never been much of a rider, but she'd learned fast these past weeks. Necessity was a powerful teacher. "We'll be back in a week," Ezra told Buck. "Maybe less if the lawyer can work fast." "And if you're not?" Ezra's jaw tightened. "Then ride to Fort Carson. Tell them what happened. Tell them Marcus Crane and the Morrison Mining Consortium murdered 2 citizens of the Colorado Territory." Buck nodded grimly. "Understood." Ezra looked out over his land, the fields he'd worked, the barn he'd built, the house, where he'd known both the greatest love and the greatest loss of his life. Then he looked at Clara, sitting straight and proud on her horse, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Let's go," he said. They rode out as the sun climbed over the mountains. Behind them, 15 men watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Then the waiting began. The road to Denver was long and dangerous. They followed the main trail for the first day, making good time through the valley. But as the terrain grew rougher, Ezra took them off the road, following paths that only a man who'd lived his whole life in these mountains would know. "Crane will have men watching the main roads," he explained. "We go through the backcountry. It's slower but safer." Clara didn't argue. She trusted Ezra with her life, trusted him more than she'd ever trusted anyone. They made camp the first night in a small clearing by a stream. Ezra built a fire while Clara prepared a simple meal from their supplies. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. "Anything." "That night, when you came to my room, when you showed me the safe." She hesitated. "Why did you really do it?" Ezra was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was scared." "Of what?" "Of losing you." He stared into the fire. "When Crane came that first time, when I saw the way he looked at you, something snapped inside me. I realized that you could be taken away, that this happiness I'd found could disappear just like before. I'm not going anywhere. I know that now. But that night, I needed you to know what you meant to me. Needed you to understand that I would give everything to keep you safe." He looked at her, and the firelight turned his eyes to gold. "I spent 6 years protecting myself from feeling anything. Then you came along and tore down every wall I'd built." Clara moved to sit beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I didn't mean to tear down walls." "I know. That's what made it real." His arm came around her. "Mary Ellen was the love of my youth. She was sunshine and laughter and everything bright. Losing her nearly killed me. You don't have to compare us." "I'm not comparing. I'm explaining." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Mary Ellen was spring. You're autumn. Different. Not better or worse, just different. She taught me how to love. You're teaching me how to live again." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me." "I mean every word." They sat together until the fire burned to embers. Then wordlessly, Ezra spread their bedrolls side by side. Not touching, but close. Close enough to hear each other breathe. Close enough to know they weren't alone. "Good night, Clara," Ezra whispered. "Good night, Ezra." She fell asleep to the sound of the stream and the steady rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't dream of darkness. She dreamed of home. They found the ambush on the 3rd day. Ezra had stopped his horse suddenly, his hand shooting up in warning. Clara reined in beside him, her heart already racing. "What is it?" she whispered. Smell that. Clara inhaled. Wood smoke. Faint but unmistakable. Could be travelers, she said. Could be. Ezra's hand moved to his rifle. Stay here. Ezra. I mean it, Clara. If something happens, you ride back the way we came. Don't stop for anything. Before she could argue, he was gone, moving through the trees with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. Clara sat frozen on her horse, counting her heartbeats, praying to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Minutes passed. Each one felt like an hour. Then Ezra emerged from the brush, his face grim. 6 men, he said quietly, camped right where the trail narrows. They're not travelers, Clara. They're waiting. For us. For us. Clara's hands tightened on her reins. What do we do? Ezra looked at her, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. The weighing of risks. The measuring of distances. There's another way, he said. Longer. Harder. Through the high pass. But it'll take us around them. Then we go around. It means another 2 days on the trail. Maybe 3. I don't care if it takes 2 weeks. Clara leaned forward, her jaw set. I didn't come this far to die in an ambush. Neither did you. Something flickered in Ezra's eyes. Pride, maybe. Or love. Follow me, he said. And stay close. They turned their horses and disappeared into the mountains. The high pass was brutal. The trail, if it could be called a trail, wound through terrain that seemed designed to break both horse and rider. Steep climbs, treacherous descents, narrow ledges where one wrong step meant a fall of 100 feet or more. Clara's hands blistered on the reins. Her legs ached from gripping the saddle. But she didn't complain. Didn't slow down. Didn't ask for rest. Ezra watched her with growing admiration. You're tougher than you look, he said on the second night as they made camp in a shallow cave. I'm tougher than I knew. Clara flexed her sore fingers. A month ago, I would have said this was impossible. I would have given up before we started. What changed? She looked at him across the small fire. I found something worth fighting for. Ezra's throat tightened. Clara. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She moved to sit beside him, her shoulder pressing against his. I'm not going to let Marcus Crane take that away. I'm not going to let anyone take that away. Ezra pulled her close. When this is over, when we're safe, I want to do this right. Do what right? This, us. He hesitated, and Clara felt his heart pounding against her cheek. I want to marry you, Clara. I want to stand up in front of God and everyone and promise to love you for the rest of my days. Clara's breath caught. Are you asking me? I'm warning you. His voice was rough with emotion. When we get home, I'm going to ask. Proper-like, with a ring and everything. I needed you to know. In case something happens, I needed you to know my intentions. Clara lifted her face to his. Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. I know that I love you. I know that you love me. I know that we've survived this far through sheer stubbornness and divine intervention. She pressed her lips to his jaw. We're going to make it, Ezra. We're going to get to Denver. We're going to clear my name. And then you're going to marry me. Is that a yes? It's a promise. They held each other through the cold mountain night, drawing warmth from each other's bodies, drawing strength from each other's hearts. And when morning came, they rode on. Denver rose from the plains like a promise. Clara had never seen a city so big. Buildings 3 stories tall, streets crowded with wagons and horses and people of every description. The noise was overwhelming, vendors, shouting wheels, rattling voices raised in a dozen different languages. Ezra navigated through the chaos with practiced ease. He'd been to Denver before, Clara remembered. During the war, during happier times. The lawyer's office is on Larimer Street, he said. Man named William Foster. His brother saved my life at Chickamauga. And you trust him? With my life. Ezra glanced at her. With yours. They tied their horses outside a modest brick building and climbed the stairs to the second floor. A brass plate on the door read, William Foster, Attorney at Law. Ezra knocked. Come in. The office was small but tidy. A man rose from behind a desk, thin, bespectacled with a kind face and ink-stained fingers. Ezra Blackwood. William Foster extended his hand with a genuine smile. It's been too long. It has. Ezra shook his hand firmly. William, this is Clara Dawson. She's the reason we're here. William's eyes moved to Clara, taking her measure. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. Please sit. Tell me everything. They told him. Clara started from the beginning, her husband's death, the men with papers losing everything she owned. Ezra picked up the story from there. Marcus Crane, the Morrison Mining Consortium, the threats and the ambush they'd narrowly avoided. William listened without interrupting. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. May I see the document Crane showed you? We don't have it, Ezra said. He took it with him. But I remember the details, Clara added. It said Thomas owed $3,200 to the Morrison Mining Consortium, signed by a judge in Denver, witnessed and notarized. William's eyebrows rose. Do you remember the judge's name? Clara thought back. Henderson. Judge Harold Henderson. Something flickered across William's face. Interesting. Why? Because Harold Henderson has been dead for 8 months. William stood and moved to a filing cabinet. He passed last autumn. Apoplexy. I handled the estate settlement myself. Clara's heart leaped. Then the document is a forgery. Almost certainly. William pulled out a thick folder. Morrison Mining Consortium. They've been on my radar for some time. They target widows, Clara. Specifically widows of miners and prospectors who died in debt. They create false documents, use intimidation, and exploit the fact that most women in your situation have no one to turn to. But I do have someone. Clara looked at Ezra. I have him. William nodded. And that makes all the difference. With Ezra's resources and my legal knowledge, we can fight this. I can file an injunction today. Have the original documents examined by a handwriting expert. If they're forgeries, and I'm confident they are, we can have Crane and his employers arrested for fraud. How long will that take? Ezra asked. The injunction I can have by tomorrow. The full investigation, a few weeks. Maybe a month. We don't have a month. Crane knows we're coming. He'll have men watching every road out of Denver. William was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled a sharp, knowing smile. Leave that to me. I have connections in this city that Crane knows nothing about. The territorial marshal owes me a favor. Several favors, actually. He moved to the door. Stay here tonight. There's a hotel 2 blocks east the Continental. Tell them William Foster sent you. Tomorrow we'll set things in motion. William? Ezra's voice stopped him. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me when this is over. William's face softened. Your brother saved my life, Ezra. I've been waiting 20 years to repay that debt. Now I finally can. The Continental Hotel was modest but clean. Clara and Ezra took separate rooms. Propriety still mattered even now. But they ate supper together in the small dining room, their heads bent close, speaking in hushed voices. Do you believe him? Clara asked. About the documents being forgeries. I believe him. William's the most honest man I know. Then why do I still feel afraid? Ezra reached across the table and took her hand. Because we've been running for days. Because men have been trying to hurt us. Because you've spent your whole life learning that hope is dangerous. He squeezed her fingers. It's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to give up. Clara turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. I'm not giving up. I'm just tired. Then rest. Tomorrow William files the injunction, the day after we start home. This nightmare is almost over. But nightmares, as Clara knew too well, had a way of continuing long after you thought they'd ended. She woke to darkness and a hand over her mouth. Panic exploded through her body. She thrashed, tried to scream, but the hand pressed harder. A voice hissed in her ear. "Stop fighting. You'll only make it worse." She knew that voice. Marcus Crane. Her blood turned to ice. "I'm going to remove my hand," Crane said. "If you scream, my man in the next room will put a bullet through Ezra Blackwood's head. Do you understand?" Clara nodded. The hand lifted. Clara gasped for air. "How did you find us?" "I have eyes everywhere, Mrs. Dawson. Did you really think you could sneak into Denver without me knowing?" Crane moved into the dim light from the window. His face was a mask of cold amusement. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, running through the mountains like some kind of wild animal, making me look foolish in front of my employers. Your documents are forgeries. William Foster knows. The territorial marshal will know by tomorrow." Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Fear, anger. Both. "William Foster is a nuisance. He'll be dealt with. If you hurt him, you'll what?" Crane leaned close, his breath hot on her face. "You're a nobody, Mrs. Dawson. A homeless widow with no family, no money, no power. The only thing standing between you and complete destruction is Ezra Blackwood, and right now he's got a gun pointed at his head." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. You're going to come with me, quietly, without a fuss. In the morning, Blackwood will wake up to find you gone. He'll search, he'll rage, he'll do all the things men like him do. But he won't find you. And eventually he'll go home to his ranch and try to forget. He won't forget. He'll come for me. Then he'll die." Crane's voice was matter-of-fact. "I don't particularly want to kill him. Dead ranchers attract attention. But if he forces my hand..." He shrugged. "One more body buried in the mountains. It won't be the first." Clara's mind raced. She needed time, needed to think, needed to find some way out of this nightmare. "Why me?" she asked. "There must be 100 widows you could target. Why are you so determined to take me?" "Because you made it personal." Crane's jaw tightened. "When you ran, when you found protection, when you made me look like a fool in front of my men, you turned this into something more than business. My employers might be satisfied with your debt paid in cash. I'm not. So this is about pride. This is about power, about showing everyone what happens to women who think they can fight back." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Get dressed. We leave in 5 minutes." Clara's eyes darted to the door, to the window, to anything that might offer escape. "Don't even think about it," Crane warned. "My man has orders to shoot at the first sign of trouble. You might escape, but Blackwood dies. Is that what you want?" It wasn't. God help her, it wasn't. Clara dressed in silence, her hands shaking. Her mind kept circling back to Ezra. Ezra asleep in the next room. Ezra with a gun pointed at his head. Ezra who had risked everything for her and might die because of it. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. But how Crane bound her wrists with rope and led her down the back stairs. A carriage waited in the alley, dark and anonymous. One of his men sat on the driver's seat. Another emerged from the shadows. "Where's the third?" Crane asked. "Watching Blackwood. He's still asleep." "Good. Let's..." The shot came from nowhere. Crane spun, reaching for his gun, but he was too slow. A figure lunged from the darkness and tackled him to the ground. More shots, shouts, the sound of fists hitting flesh. Clara stumbled backward, her bound hands making it impossible to run. She hit the carriage and slid down, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Then a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Clara, Clara, where are you? Ezra! Here!" she screamed. "I'm here!" He appeared out of the darkness like an avenging angel, blood on his knuckles, fire in his eyes. He saw her and ran. "Are you hurt?" His hands were on her face, her shoulders checking for damage. "Did he touch you?" "I'm fine. Ezra, I'm fine." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "How did you—" "William." Ezra cut the ropes on her wrists. "He had men watching the hotel. When they saw Crane's people moving, they woke me." Then he pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought—" "You didn't lose me. You won't ever lose me." Behind them, the fight was ending. Clara saw William Foster standing over Marcus Crane, a pistol in his hand. Two more men friends of William's, she assumed, were securing the other attackers. "Marcus Crane," William said, his voice cold with satisfaction. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and attempted murder. The territorial marshal will be very interested in having a conversation with you." Crane glared up at him, hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Ezra stepped forward, Clara still in his arms. "Your employers are about to learn that their documents are worthless. Their operation is exposed. And you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison." "Or worse," William added. "Kidnapping a woman in Colorado territory is a hanging offense." For the first time, Clara saw fear in Crane's eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who had finally realized that his power was gone. "Get him out of here," Ezra said. William's men dragged Crane away. The carriage followed, carrying his accomplices. Within minutes, the alley was empty. Clara sagged against Ezra. "Is it over? Is it really over?" "Almost." He kissed her forehead. "There's still paperwork, still a trial. But Crane will never hurt you again. I swear it." Clara believed him. The next 3 days passed in a blur of legal proceedings. William worked tirelessly, filing motions, presenting evidence, calling witnesses. The territorial marshal, a gruff man named Harrison who seemed to genuinely hate criminals, took a personal interest in the case. By the third day, the truth was undeniable. Every document Marcus Crane had used was a forgery. Judge Henderson's signature had been faked. The Morrison Mining Consortium was a front for a criminal enterprise that had defrauded dozens of widows across 3 territories. Harrison himself delivered the news to Clara and Ezra. "It's done," he said. "Crane's confessed to everything in exchange for avoiding the noose. He's given us names, dates, locations. The whole operation is going down." Clara felt her knees weaken. "What about the other women? The ones they took?" "We're working on finding them. Some have been recovered already. Others—" Harrison's face darkened. "We'll do everything we can." "And Clara?" Ezra asked. "She's free." "Completely. The debts attributed to her husband were fabricated. She doesn't owe anyone anything." Harrison extended his hand to Clara. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Dawson. What you did standing up to these men refusing to be intimidated, it's going to help a lot of people." Clara shook his hand, too overwhelmed to speak. When Harrison left, Ezra turned to her. "It's time to go home." Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. They left Denver the next morning. The ride back was nothing like the desperate journey they'd made coming in. No ambushes to fear, no predators hunting them, just open road and clear skies and the promise of everything they'd fought for. They stopped at the same spot where they'd camped before the clearing by the stream. This time there was no tension, no fear, just peace. "I have something for you," Ezra said. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's heart stopped. "I know I said I'd wait until we got home," Ezra continued. "But I've been carrying this since Denver, and I can't wait another minute." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple gold, with a small blue stone that caught the firelight. "It was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to me before she died, told me to save it for the woman who'd make my life worth living again." Clara's vision blurred with tears. Clara Ruth Dawson. Ezra took her hand. "You came to my ranch with nothing but a skillet and a broken heart. You fed my men. You thawed my soul. You stood beside me against men who wanted to destroy us both, and somewhere along the way you made me remember what it feels like to be alive." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "Will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, looked at the man kneeling before her, looked at the future spreading out ahead of them like the endless sky. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Ezra swept her into his arms and kissed her not gently, not carefully, but with all the passion and hope and love they'd both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing, both crying, both so full of joy that it seemed impossible their hearts could contain it. "Let's go home," Clara said. "Let's go home," Ezra agreed. They mounted their horses and rode toward the setting sun, toward Blackwood Ranch, toward the life they would build together. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara Ruth Dawson wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The ranch came into view on the 5th day. Clara saw at first the familiar spread of buildings, the fenced pastures, the smoke curling from the kitchen chimney. Her heart swelled so big she thought it might burst right out of her chest. "We're home," she whispered. Ezra reached over and took her hand. "We're home." They rode down the ridge, slowly savoring every moment. The sun was setting behind them, painting everything gold and rose and amber. It was the most beautiful thing Clara had ever seen. Then Tommy spotted them. "They're back." His voice carried across the valley like a gunshot. "Boss is back. Clara's back." Within minutes, every man on the ranch had gathered at the gate. They were shouting, waving their hats, some of them actually running to meet the horses. Old Si reached them first, his walking stick forgotten somewhere behind him. "Thank the Lord," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank the good Lord above." Clara dismounted and found herself immediately surrounded. Tommy was hugging her. Buck was shaking Ezra's hand so hard it looked painful. Men were talking over each other, asking questions, demanding answers. "What happened in Denver? Did you see the lawyer? Is it over? Is she safe?" Ezra raised his hand for silence. The men quieted instantly. "It's over," he said. "Crane's in prison. The documents were forgeries. Clara is free." A cheer went up so loud it startled the horses and sent birds flying from the nearby trees. "But that's not all." Ezra looked at Clara, his eyes warm with love. "I asked this woman to marry me, and she said yes." The cheer that followed was even louder. Tommy whooped and threw his hat in the air. Buck's weathered face split into a grin. Old Si wiped his eyes with a bandana, not even pretending he wasn't crying. "About damn time," Si said. "I was starting to think I'd die before you two figured it out." Clara laughed through her own tears. "We figured it out." "So when's the wedding?" Tommy asked eagerly. Ezra looked at Clara. She looked back at him. "Soon," they said together. The next few weeks were the happiest of Clara's life. She threw herself into preparations with an energy she didn't know she possessed. The main house needed cleaning. Really cleaning, not just the surface work she'd done before. She attacked every room with soap and water and determination, banishing 6 years of dust and neglect. The men helped without being asked. Tommy repaired the front porch. Buck fixed the fence around the garden. Even old Si contributed, spending hours polishing the silver that had tarnished in storage. "Mary Ellen's silverware," Si explained when Clara found him at the kitchen table, a cloth in his gnarled hands. "Ezra's mother brought it from Virginia. Hasn't been used since the funeral." Clara sat down beside him. "Are you sure it's okay, using her things?" Si looked at her with those sharp blue eyes. "Child, do you think Mary Ellen would want this silver sitting in a cabinet forever? Do you think she'd want Ezra alone and miserable for the rest of his days?" "No, but—" "There's no but." Si held up a spoon now gleaming in the lamplight. "Mary Ellen loved that man with everything she had. If she could see him now, happy, healing, ready to start again, she'd be dancing in heaven." Clara's throat tightened. "You really believe that—" "I know it." Cy pressed the spoon into her hand. You're not replacing her, Clara. You're continuing what she started. You're giving Ezra the life she wanted him to have. That's not betrayal. That's love. Clara looked at the spoon in her hand. Such a small thing. Such a simple thing. But it meant everything. Thank you, Cy. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll use the good china for the wedding dinner. Clara laughed. I promise. The day before the wedding, Eleanor Price came to call. Clara was in the kitchen. Where else would she be when she heard hooves in the yard? She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. Eleanor sat on a wagon seat, her steel gray hair tucked under a bonnet, her face as stern as ever. But her eyes were soft. Mrs. Price. Clara hurried down the steps. What brings you all the way out here? Heard you were getting married. Eleanor climbed down from the wagon. Figured the woman who sent you here ought to see how things turned out. You did more than send me here. You saved my life. I gave you directions and some cornbread. You did the rest. Eleanor studied Clara's face. You look different. Happier. I am happier. Happier than I ever thought possible. Good. Eleanor reached into the wagon and pulled out a large basket. I brought a few things. Nothing fancy. Just some preserves, some fabric, a few ribbons for your hair. Clara's eyes burned. You didn't have to. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. Eleanor pressed the basket into Clara's hands. That night in Miller's Creek when I found you at the water pump, I saw something in you. A spark that hadn't gone out yet. I knew if I could just point you in the right direction, you'd find your way. How could you know that I didn't even know that myself? Because I was you once. Eleanor's voice dropped. 40 years ago. Widow at 25. No family, no money, no hope. A stranger helped me when no one else would. He didn't have to. He just did. What happened to him? Eleanor smiled, a rare, beautiful thing. I married him. We had 37 years together before he passed. Best 37 years of my life. Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know how to thank you. Live well, love hard, pass it on when you can. Eleanor patted her arm. That's all the thanks I need. She stayed for supper telling stories that made the men laugh and Clara cry. When she left, she hugged Clara tight, a real hug, not the stiff embrace of acquaintances. Be happy, Eleanor whispered. I will, Clara promised, and she meant it. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Clara woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, the same bed she'd cried in that first night, the same bed where she'd felt hope for the first time in weeks, and watched the light change from gray to gold. Today she would become Clara Ruth Blackwood. A knock at her door made her sit up. Clara. It was Ezra's voice muffled by the wood. You awake? You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. It's bad luck. I ain't coming in. He paused. I just wanted to tell you something. Clara moved to the door, pressing her palm flat against it. She could almost feel him on the other side. Tell me. I've been standing here for 10 minutes trying to find the words. Figured I'd just say it plain. Another pause. I spent 6 years thinking my life was over. Thinking I'd already had my one chance at happiness and squandered it. Then you showed up with a skillet and a prayer, and everything changed. Clara's hand trembled against the wood. I don't deserve you, Ezra continued. I know that. A broken-down rancher with more ghosts than good sense. But I promise you this, Clara Ruth Dawson. I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Ezra? I'll see you at the altar. She heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. Then silence. Clara pressed her forehead against the door and let herself cry. Not from sadness, not from fear, from overwhelming, impossible joy. The ceremony was held on the hill behind the main house. It wasn't a grand affair. No church, no flowers, no fancy decorations. Just a small clearing, a wooden arch that Tommy had built overnight, and every person Clara had come to love gathered in a circle. The minister borrowed from Ridgemont for the occasion stood beneath the arch with a worn Bible in his hands. Old Si stood as Ezra's witness tears already streaming down his weathered face. Eleanor Price stood as Clara's, her stern expression softened into something almost maternal. The ranch hands filled out the rest of the circle, Tommy grinning so wide it looked painful. Buck with his hat in his hands. Marcus and Pete and all the others who had become family. Then Ezra appeared. Clara's breath caught. He wore a dark suit pulled from storage, she guessed probably his wedding suit from before. His hair was neatly combed. His beard was freshly trimmed. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Those dark eyes that had been so empty when she first arrived. Those eyes that had slowly, carefully learned to hold hope again. They were shining. "Ready," Eleanor whispered. Clara nodded. She couldn't speak. She walked toward the arch, toward the man who had given her everything, toward the future she never dared to imagine. Ezra took her hands when she reached him. His fingers were trembling. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "You're crying." "So are you." They both laughed, soft and wet and full of wonder. The minister cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Clara barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Ezra, too busy memorizing every line of his face, every fleck of gray in his dark hair, every tiny movement of his expression. This was real. This was happening. This man, this good, kind, broken, healing man, was about to become her husband. "Do you, Ezra Thomas Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Ezra's voice was steady. "I do." "And do you, Clara Ruth Dawson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Clara looked into Ezra's eyes. She saw her past there, the pain, the loss, the desperate journey that had brought her here. She saw her present, the love, the hope, the family she had found in the most unlikely place. And she saw her future, the life they would build together, the challenges they would face, the joy they would share. "I do," she said. The minister smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ezra, you may kiss your bride." Ezra pulled her close. His lips found hers. The world fell away. When they finally broke apart, the cheering was deafening. Tommy was crying openly now, tears streaming down his young face. Buck was clapping so hard his hands had to hurt. Old Si had his eyes closed, his lips moving in silent prayer. "I love you," Ezra whispered against her ear. "I love you too," Clara whispered back. They turned to face their family. This strange, wonderful family of ranch hands and old friends, and one elderly woman from a town Clara had nearly died in, and walked back down the aisle together. Man and wife. Home at last. The celebration lasted long into the night. Tables had been set up in the yard loaded with food that Clara had been preparing for days. Fried chicken and fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and apple pie. The men ate until they groaned and then ate some more. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else found a harmonica. Music filled the night air, and before long, people were dancing rough, clumsy dances that had more enthusiasm than skill. Clara watched from the porch, her heart so full it ached. Ezra appeared beside her, 2 cups of cider in his hands. "Not joining the dancing. My feet hurt." She accepted the cider gratefully. "Besides, I like watching. Everyone looks so happy." "They are happy." Ezra sat down beside her. "You did that, you know. Brought happiness back to this place. It was dying before you came. I was dying. You made everything live again." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "We saved each other." "Maybe we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their friends dance and laugh and celebrate. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Can I tell you something?" Clara asked. "Anything." "That first night when I collapsed in the plaza in Miller's Creek, I wanted to die. I thought about just lying there in the mud and letting go. It seemed easier than fighting." Ezra's arm tightened around her. "But then I remembered something my mother used to say. The night is always darkest just before the dawn." I'd never really believed it before, but something made me get up. Something made me cook those beans. Something made me keep going. I'm glad you did. So am I. Clara lifted her face to his. "If I'd given up that night, I never would have found you. I never would have found this place. I never would have known what it felt like to be loved, truly loved for who I am." Ezra kissed her softly. "You're not just loved, Clara. You're treasured. You're cherished. You're the answer to prayers I forgot I was praying." Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd cried more in the past month than she had in the previous year. But these were good tears. Healing tears. "Take me home," she whispered. "Take me to our home." Ezra stood and offered his hand. Clara took it. They walked away from the celebration, away from the noise and the music and the laughter. Through the front door, down the hall, to the room that had been his alone for 6 years, to the room that was now theirs. 3 months later, the first snow fell. Clara stood at the window watching white flakes drift down from a gray sky. Behind her, a fire crackled in the hearth. Ezra sat at his desk, working through ledgers, a task he used to do alone, but now did with her nearby. "Deep thoughts?" he asked without looking up. "Just remembering." Clara touched the cold glass. "A year ago, I was still married to Thomas. Still living a life that felt like a slow death. I had no idea what was coming." "None of us ever do." "No, I suppose not." She turned from the window. "Ezra, I need to tell you something." Something in her voice made him look up. "What is it?" Clara crossed the room and knelt beside his chair. She took his hand and placed it flat against her belly. "We're going to have a baby." Ezra went absolutely still. "I've suspected for a few weeks." Clara continued, her voice trembling. "But I wanted to be sure before I told you. The doctor in Ridgemont confirmed it yesterday. I'm almost 3 months along." Ezra's hand pressed against her stomach. His eyes were wide, disbelieving. "A baby," he whispered. "A baby." Clara saw the emotions war across his face, joy and fear, hope and grief, the shadow of what he'd lost fighting against the light of what he was about to gain. "Ezra, say something, please." He slid out of the chair and knelt on the floor beside her. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "I thought that part of my life was over," he said, his voice raw. "I thought God had decided I didn't deserve to be a father. After Mary Ellen, after the baby." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I buried that dream, Clara. I buried it so deep I forgot it was ever there." "Are you happy?" "Happy?" A broken laugh escaped him. "I'm terrified. I'm overwhelmed. I'm so scared something will go wrong that I can barely breathe." His thumbs wiped tears from her cheeks. "But underneath all of that, yes. Yes, I'm happy. Happier than I have any right to be." Clara grabbed his hands. "Nothing is going to go wrong. I'm healthy. The doctor says everything looks perfect. We're going to have this baby, Ezra. We're going to raise it together in this house, on this land, surrounded by people who love us. You promise." "I promise." Ezra pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could feel his heart pounding against her chest. They stayed like that for a long time, kneeling on the floor of the study, snow falling silently outside. "I need to tell Cy," Ezra finally said, "and Tommy, and Buck. God, they're going to lose their minds." Clara laughed. "They're going to spoil this child rotten." "Absolutely rotten." Ezra pulled back a grin spreading across his face. "Can I tell them now?" "It's the middle of the night." "I don't care. I need to tell someone, or I'm going to explode." Clara shook her head, still laughing. "Go. Tell them. I'll be here when you get back." Ezra kissed her hard, then practically ran from the room. She heard him thundering down the hall, heard the front door bang open, heard his voice carrying across the snowy yard. "Cy, Tommy, wake up. I'm going to be a father." Clara stayed on the floor, her hand pressed against her belly, pressed against the new life growing inside her. The life that she and Ezra had created together. A year ago, she'd had nothing. No home, no family, no hope. She'd collapsed in the mud and wanted to die. Now she had everything. A husband who loved her, a home that welcomed her, a family that would fight for her, and a child growing beneath her heart, a child who would never know hunger or fear or loneliness. A child who would grow up surrounded by love. Clara. Ruth Blackwood stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see Ezra in the yard, hatless and coatless, gesturing wildly, while old Cy laughed and Tommy danced in the snow. Lanterns were flickering on in the bunkhouse. Voices were rising in celebration. She placed her hand on the cold glass and smiled. Once she had told a stranger, "I'm not worth much, sir, but I can cook." She had been so wrong. She was worth everything. She had always been worth everything. It had just taken the right person to help her see it. The snow continued to fall. The celebration continued outside. And Clara stood at the window watching her family rejoice, knowing that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. The baby would come in spring, bringing joy and sleepless nights, and the kind of love that changed everything. The ranch would grow and prosper under Ezra's steady hand and Clara's warm heart. Tommy would fall in love with a schoolteacher from town. Old Cy would live long enough to hold the baby in his arms and weep with gratitude. And through it all, Ezra and Clara would stand together, partners in everything, bound not just by vows, but by the unbreakable knowledge that they had saved each other from the darkness. Clara turned from the window as Ezra burst back through the door covered in snow, his face alight with joy. "They want to see you," he said breathlessly. "Everyone wants to congratulate you." Clara took his hand. "Then let's not keep them waiting." They walked out into the snow together, into the arms of their family, into the life they had built from nothing but courage and hope and love. And Clara Ruth Blackwood, once homeless, once hopeless, once convinced she was worth nothing at all, finally understood the truth that had been waiting for her all along. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was meant to be.